嗨，周末愉快，我是 Jenny， 欢迎来到 Jenny 周末来闲聊。好，今天 Jenny 要跟你聊一个超级生活化的话题，而且我相信你每天都在参与其中，只是你可能从来没有意识到。问你一个问题，你昨天吃了什么？或者今天早上吃了什么？不管是一颗草莓还是一杯咖啡，不管是一块巧克力还是一片面包，你有没有想过，那一口食物在到达你嘴里之前，到底旅行了多远？我要告诉你一个秘密，你的餐桌其实比你想象中更国际化，超级夸张的那种。一颗小小的草莓，可能在到达你手上之前，已经去过5个国家。听起来很荒唐，对不对？但这完全是真实发生的事。今天 Jenny 就要带你一起深入探索食物的全球供应链秘密，用最轻松的方式聊一个其实跟我们每天生活息息相关的大议题。我们从一个你最熟悉的场景开始。每天早上你起床，可能第一件事就是泡一杯咖啡，或者去买一杯咖啡。那杯咖啡里的咖啡豆从哪里来？全球咖啡豆主要产区有几个大国？伊索比亚是咖啡的发源地。关于咖啡的起源有一个很有趣的传说。话说大概在9世纪的时候，伊索比亚有个牧羊人叫卡尔迪，他发现他的羊吃了一种红色浆果之后，变得异常活跃，跳来跳去，根本不睡觉。他把这个浆果带去给修道院的僧侣看，僧侣们把它煮成饮料喝，发现喝了之后整个人精神大振，可以彻夜祷告，不打瞌睡。这就是咖啡的起源故事。不管这个故事是真是假，伊索比亚确实是咖啡的故乡。到现在伊索比亚还是全球最重要的咖啡产地之一。除了伊索比亚，还有哥伦比亚和巴西和越南。光是这4个国家就生产了全球大部分的咖啡豆。那你喝的那杯咖啡豆被采摘下来之后，要先在当地进行初步处理，去除咖啡浆果的外皮和果肉，再把咖啡豆晒干或水洗处理，然后装袋出口到世界各地的烘豆商。烘豆商把生豆烘焙成熟豆，再卖给咖啡店或饮料厂或个人消费者。整个过程咖啡豆可能横跨了几个大洲。你每天早晨那一杯咖啡，是一段超级壮阔旅程的终点。这就是食物全球供应链的冰山一角。听起来有点复杂，对不对？但别担心，今天 Jenny 要用最轻松的方式带你玩一圈，让你下次吃东西的时候，可以用全新的眼光看待你盘子里的食物。好，让我先解释一下食物供应链是什么。所谓供应链，就是一个产品从原料到最终消费者手上的整个流程。放到食物上就是从种子种下去开始，一路到农夫采收，然后是运输加工储存，再到批发商零售商，最后才到你的餐桌上。听起来是一条直线，对吧？但现代的食物供应链根本就不是直线，它是一个超级复杂的立体网络。有时候一样食材在到达你手上之前，已经在这个网络里旅行了好几圈。我们来玩一个游戏，就叫做追踪你的食物。先从香蕉开始。香蕉是很多人每天都会吃的水果。你去超市买到的那一根香蕉，如果不是台湾本地种的，很可能来自菲律宾或者厄瓜多。你知道厄瓜多在哪里吗？在南美洲的西北角，面对太平洋的那一侧。厄瓜多是全球最大的香蕉出口国，每年出口大量香蕉到全球各地。那些香蕉在农场还是绿色的时候就被采摘下来，因为如果等到熟了才采，运输途中就会烂掉。采收之后，香蕉会被快速装进大型纸箱，然后装上冷藏货轮。所谓冷藏货轮，就是有温控系统的货船。香蕉在里面大概维持摄氏13度左右，这样可以让它维持在青绿状态不熟透。货轮然后在太平洋或大西洋上漂了1-2个星期，到达目的地的港口之后，香蕉被卸下来送到催熟仓库。在催熟仓库里，工人会释放乙烯气体，乙烯就是天然的植物成熟荷尔蒙。香蕉自己成熟的时候也会释放乙烯，所以用乙烯催熟就是模仿自然的过程。几天之后， 香蕉就从绿色变成了你在超市看到的黄色，然后再配送到各个超市。你摘下那根香蕉放进购物车，你知道它出发的时候还是一根绿色的香蕉吗？它旅行了几千公里才变黄给你吃。每次想到这个我都觉得很神奇。接下来说说牛肉。台湾人很爱吃牛肉，牛肉面是国民美食对吧？那碗牛肉面里的牛肉从哪里来？台湾自己也有养牛，但因为台湾土地面积有限，本地牛肉的产量远远不够满足需求，所以台湾每年进口大量的牛肉，主要来自澳洲和美国还有纽西兰。你想象一下一块澳洲牛肉的旅程，在澳洲广阔的牧场里，一头牛吃着牧草长大，然后被送到屠宰场处理，切割成各个部位，真空包装，然后快速冷冻，装进冷冻货柜，上冷冻货轮，横越印度洋或太平洋，到达台湾的港口，还要通过农委会的检疫和海关，确认没有疫病和符合食安规定，才可以进入台湾市场，然后进到大型冷冻仓库储存，再按照订单分送到各地的肉商，肉商再卖给餐厅和超市和一般消费者。整个过程可能花上几个礼拜甚至更长，而且从屠宰到你吃到嘴里，全程都要维持在摄氏零下18度以下。这需要多么庞大的冷链基础设施？全球有无数的冷冻船和冷冻仓库和冷藏车，就是为了把这些食物安全送到你手上。光这一点就真的很了不起。现在来说说我最爱的巧克力。一片巧克力的故事可能是食物里最精彩的旅程之一。可可豆主要种植在西非和中南美洲，西非的加纳和象牙海岸加起来生产了全球大概60%的可可豆，所以你吃的大部分巧克力的可可豆很可能就是从西非来的。可可树是一种很特别的植物，它的果实直接长在树干上，不是长在枝头，看起来就像一个个大橄榄球挂在树干上。可可果里面有白色果肉，包覆着一粒粒可可豆。采收之后要先把可可豆和果肉一起放在大容器里发酵，发酵的过程很重要，这个步骤让可可豆发展出复杂的风味前驱物，也就是未来巧克力香气的来源。发酵之后要晒干，让水分降到一定程度，才能储存和运输。晒干的可可豆装袋之后，就出口到欧洲或北美或其他地方的加工厂。在加工厂里，可可豆要先烘焙，烘焙的温度和时间决定了最终的风味，然后磨碎。这个过程中可可豆会变成可可膏，因为可可豆本身含有很高比例的油脂，叫做可可脂，然后可可膏可以进一步分离，一边是可可脂，一边是可可粉。巧克力制造商拿到这些半成品，加入砂糖、奶粉和额外的可可脂，调制出不同比例的配方，就是不同种类的黑巧克力、牛奶巧克力、白巧克力，再进行精炼回火成型，最后包装出厂。全球化之后，各国再分装销售。你手上的那一片巧克力，它的原料从西非出发，在欧洲加工制作，然后才到了你面前，至少跨越了2-3个大洲。一片小小的巧克力，背后是多么壮阔的旅程。好，说了这么多食物旅行的故事，你可能会问一个很自然的问题：为什么不干脆在当地吃当地的食物就好了？这不是更简单更省事吗？这个问题问得非常好，答案是因为比较利益原则。这个词听起来很学术，对吧？但概念其实很简单，就是每个地方都有它特别擅长做的事。有些地方的土壤气候特别适合种某些作物，有些地方的技术特别适合做某些加工，然后全球各地就自然而然分工合作，让每样食物都在最适合它的地方生产。举个例子，哥伦比亚的安第斯山脉地区有特定的海拔和温差和雨量，这样的自然条件让那里种出来的咖啡豆有着特别丰富的水果酸质和花香，是其他地方很难复制的风味。再举个例子，荷兰的温室农业。荷兰地处北海边缘，本来不是农业生产的理想环境，日照时间相对短，但荷兰人用非常先进的温室技术， 把农业变成了一门精密科学。荷兰是全球第2大农产品出口国，第1大是美国，但荷兰的土地面积只有台湾的1倍多一点点，就靠着高科技温室农业，成为全球重要的农业出口国。这就是比较优势，每个地方用自己的优势，为全球食物系统做出贡献。但问题来了，这种全球分工的食物系统，带来了一个很严重的问题，就是碳排放和环境代价。你有听说过食物里程这个概念吗？食物里程就是计算你的食物从产地到你手边走了多远的路，以里程数来表示。一般人的日常饮食，如果把所有食材的食物里程加起来，平均可能高达好几千公里。想象一下，你一餐饭里的食材，饭是台湾米，所以相对近，但如果有进口牛肉，那可能是几千公里；如果有进口橄榄油，那可能是1万多公里；如果有进口起司，那又是几千公里。全部加起来真的相当惊人。那食物里程高，就代表对环境影响一定很大吗？这里有一个很有趣的反直觉现象，很多人以为食物里程越高，碳排放一定越大，所以一定要买在地的食物才最环保。但研究显示，这个直觉其实不完全正确。食物的碳排放不只看运输，最大的部分其实是食物本身的生产方式。举个例子，牛肉，养牛本身就是高碳排的农业活动，主要不是因为把牛运输到全球，而是因为牛在消化草料的过程中，会在瘤胃里进行发酵，这个过程会产生大量甲烷。甲烷是一种温室气体，对气候的影响是2氧化碳的几十倍。牛不断打嗝和放屁释放甲烷，再加上种植饲料作物需要的土地和水，以及农药和肥料的生产过程，才是牛肉高碳排的主要原因。所以有时候在台湾买纽西兰进口的羊肉，它的碳排放反而比你想象的低，因为纽西兰的羊主要是吃天然牧草，不需要种植大量高碳排的饲料作物。整体算下来，虽然运输距离远，但生产过程的碳排本来就低，总量反而可能比本地用大量饲料养的肉更低。这个结果是不是跟你的直觉相反？还有一个很有名的例子，英国科学家研究发现，在英国当地温室里种的玫瑰花，因为英国气候不适合种玫瑰，需要大量的温室加热能源，它的碳排放反而比从肯亚空运过来的玫瑰还高。因为肯亚地处赤道附近，日照充足，气候温暖，种玫瑰完全不需要任何温室加热。虽然空运需要耗油，但两者一比较，本地玫瑰的碳排放反而更大。食物供应链的世界真的很复杂，很反直觉。好，现在我们要说到今天主题最应景的部分了。3月春天草莓季，现在正是台湾草莓盛产的时候，大湖的草莓卡哇伊的那种。那颗小红果，你知道它的旅程有多复杂吗？先说种苗，你以为台湾农夫种的草莓品种是台湾自己研发的吗？有一部分是，但很多受欢迎的草莓品种其实来自日本。日本在草莓品种改良这方面真的是全球顶尖的水准，什么乙女和张基和枫香都是非常受欢迎的日本草莓品种。台湾农夫从日本引进种苗，在台湾的气候土壤条件下种植，所以你吃的台湾草莓，它的品种基因可能已经跨越了台湾海峡。那如果是进口草莓的话，旅程就更长了。草莓是非常娇贵的水果，它的保鲜期很短，在常温下可能2-3天就坏掉，所以如果是从比较远的地方进口，就要用空运才能在新鲜的状态下送到你手上。草莓成熟后采收，在农场就要马上进行分拣，把大小和品质分类，装进有保湿功能的特殊包装盒，然后立刻用冷藏卡车送到机场，装上冷藏货机，可能在空中飞了几个小时到几十个小时，到达进口国的机场，卸下来之后要马上进行海关和食安检查，才能通关，然后再装上冷藏配送卡车，送到各地的配送中心，再到超市。这整个过程涉及农场的工人、分拣厂的工人、货运公司、航空公司、 机场的地勤人员、海关人员、冷藏仓库的工人、配送司机、超市员工，才到你手上。一颗小小的草莓，在他的旅程里遇到了多少人的手，帮助他到达你的面前。说到这里，我想跟你聊聊一个很多人可能没有想过的层面，就是食物供应链跟地缘政治的关系。这听起来很严肃，对不对？但我保证用最轻松的方式聊，因为这真的跟你我的日常餐桌超相关。你有没有注意到，这2-3年很多食物的价格波动很剧烈？食用油曾经大涨，鸡蛋一度很抢手，面粉和面包的价格一直在上升，这些都不是偶然的，背后都有全球供应链的因素。我们先说乌克兰，很多人可能知道乌克兰最近这几年有战争，但你知道乌克兰在全球粮食供应上有多重要吗？乌克兰有个美称叫做欧洲的面包篮，它拥有全球品质最好的黑土。黑土是非常肥沃的土壤，非常适合种植小麦和葵花和大麦和玉米。乌克兰跟俄罗斯一起，大概供应了全球30%左右的小麦出口量，还有大概50%左右的葵花油出口量。2022年战争爆发之后，乌克兰的农业生产和港口都受到严重影响，很多农田变成了战场，港口被封锁了，农民没办法正常耕作，出口也中断了。全球小麦和食用油的价格立刻暴涨，直接影响到全球很多国家的食物价格，特别是非洲和中东这些本来就很依赖进口粮食的地区，立刻面临严重的粮食安全危机。你看，一场发生在东欧的战争，怎么让非洲的人更难吃到面包？就是透过全球食物供应链这个紧密的网络，我们所有人都比自己以为的更紧密相连。另一个很有名的例子是苏伊士运河事件。苏伊士运河在埃及，是连接欧洲和亚洲的超级重要航线，全球大概1/2左右的贸易量都要经过这条运河。2021年3月，一艘超大型的货轮叫做长次号，在通过苏伊士运河的时候，因为强风侧滑，斜卡在运河里出不去，这一卡就卡了整整6天。这6天里，有几百艘船在运河两端等待，动弹不得，包括大量运送食品和原料的船只。这6天直接影响到全球供应链，让很多食品和原料的到港时间延误，进而影响到价格和供应。一艘船在沙里卡了6天，就可以让全球供应链跟着抽筋，是因为现代全球贸易太依赖少数几条关键航道了，一旦某个节点出了问题，整个系统都会感受到冲击。说完地缘政治，我们再来谈谈气候变迁对食物供应链的影响。这个话题越来越重要了，因为冲击已经不是未来式，而是现在进行式。先说咖啡，咖啡豆的生长对环境条件非常敏感，需要特定的温度范围，大概在摄氏18到24度之间最理想，还要有适当的雨量和土壤酸碱值。很多高品质的咖啡都种在所谓的咖啡带，就是南北回归线之间的热带地区，但随着全球暖化，这个带状地区的气温在持续上升，很多传统咖啡产区的环境越来越不适合种咖啡了。科学研究预测，到2050年，全球适合种植高品质咖啡的土地面积可能会减少超过1半。你爱喝的咖啡未来不只会越来越贵，某些特定风土的珍稀咖啡可能会越来越难喝到。再说可可和巧克力，西非的可可种植地区越来越频繁出现极端干旱，而且气温升高让可可树更容易受到病虫害侵袭，一种叫做可可甲腐烂病的病害，在气候变暖的环境下蔓延得更快。全球可可产量这几年一直在不稳定的波动，这就是为什么你可能发现巧克力越来越贵了，不是你的错觉，是真的有供应端地压力。香草也是一个很好的案例。你喜欢吃香草口味的冰淇淋吗？那个迷人的香草香气，如果是天然香草的话，主要来自马达加斯加这个岛国。马达加斯加在非洲东边的印度洋上，是全球最重要的天然香草产地，但马达加斯加的香草种植地区 这几年越来越频繁被强烈台风侵袭，香草植株被摧毁，产量大幅下跌，天然香草精的价格这几年涨幅非常惊人，已经成为全球最贵的香料之一了，排名大概在番红花之后的第2名。所以很多厂商开始用人工合成的香草精来替代。人工香草精的化学成分是香草醛，味道跟天然香草很像，但不完全相同。下次你买冰淇淋的时候，如果看到标示天然香草，那是相当珍贵的东西了。说了这么多全球化带来的问题，你可能在想，那我该怎么办？我能做什么？好消息是你不需要做什么大改变，从几个小小的意识开始就够了。第一个意识，多吃当季蔬果。现在3月春天，台湾当季的好东西超多的，草莓大家都知道了，还有茂谷甘甜到不行，各种春季叶菜类超鲜嫩，牛蒡也是3月的好时节。当季食材通常不只是本地生产的，而且因为在最适合的时节采收，风味是最好的，不需要长途运输，食物里程自然就低了。跟着季节走，其实是一种非常有智慧的饮食方式。第二个意识，认识你的食物来源，多逛传统市场和农夫市集，你可以直接问摊贩，这个菜从哪里来，哪个农场的。很多传统市场的菜贩是直接跟附近农场进货的，食物里程很短，而且因为不需要长途运输，通常更新鲜更好吃。农夫市集更好，你可以直接跟种菜的农夫聊天，知道他们用什么种植方式。这种连结食物和食物生产者的体验本身就很有意义。第三个意识，看一下食品标签上的原产地。台湾对进口食品有原产地标示的要求，你在超市买东西的时候，可以花几秒钟看一下这个标示。你的苹果是台湾的还是日本的还是美国的？你的鲑鱼是挪威的还是智利的还是加拿大的？你的牛肉是澳洲的还是美国的？光是建立这个意识，就会让你对食物有更深的了解。不一定要刻意选择，只是知道你吃的是什么就很好了。第四个意识，减少食物浪费。这一点其实跟食物供应链直接相关。你知道全球生产的食物里面，大概有1/3最后是被浪费掉的。1/3，这些被浪费的食物，代表的是已经消耗掉的土地、水资源和人力，以及运输冷藏的能源，都白费了。如果我们能减少食物浪费，对整个食物供应链的环境冲击，会是非常直接有效的改善。买多少用多少，剩菜好好保存，坏的食材优先用掉，这些小习惯加起来真的很重要。最后我想说一个，每次想到都让我很感动的事，你每天吃的食物，背后有多少人的努力在撑着你的每一餐。想象一下一碗牛肉面的背后，有在澳洲牧场顶着烈日照顾牛群的农夫，有在屠宰场工作的工人，有在冷冻货轮上漂洋过海的船员，有在港口卸货的码头工人，有在海关确保食品安全的人员，有在冷冻仓库业以继日工作的工人，有开着冷藏货车到处配送的司机，有在菜市场卖菜的阿姨，有在厨房熬汤备料的厨师。这是一条由无数人的劳动和心血串联起来的链，你那一口食物里，有整个世界的努力在里面。我每次想到这个，就对食物充满感谢，也更不愿意浪费食物了。你的餐桌是一个缩影，缩印了全球的农业、贸易、气候和政治。每一口食物都是一段旅程的终点，而你就是那个旅程最幸运的终点站。好，今天 Jenny 周末来闲聊就聊到这里。食物的全球供应链听起来是很大的议题，但其实就藏在你每天3餐里面。下次你拿起一颗草莓，泡一杯咖啡，或者吃一口巧克力，想一想他走过的那段旅程，会不会觉得那一口特别有味道？谢谢你今天陪 Jenny 闲聊，记得爱惜食物哦。我们下次见咯。Hey everyone, happy weekend. I am Jenny. Welcome to the Jenny Weekend Chat. Alright, today Jenny wants to chat about something that touches all of us every single day. And I am pretty confident you are already participating in it without even realizing. Let me ask you a question. What did you eat yesterday? Or what did you have this morning? Whether it was a strawberry, a cup of coffee, a piece of chocolate, or just a simple slice of toast. Have you ever stopped to wonder how far that one bite of food actually traveled before it finally reached your mouth? I want to let you in on a secret. Your dining table is actually way more international than you think. Like, seriously international. A tiny little strawberry may have visited 5 different countries before landing in your hands. Sounds kind of absurd, right? But this is completely, 100% real. Today Jenny is going to take you on a journey to explore the fascinating hidden world of the global food supply chain in the most relaxed and enjoyable way possible, so that the next time you sit down for a meal, you can look at the food on your plate with completely new eyes. Let me start with a scene that is probably very familiar to you. Every morning you wake up, and maybe the very first thing you do is make a cup of coffee. Or maybe you stop by a cafe on your way somewhere. Either way, where did those coffee beans come from? The major coffee-producing regions of the world span several countries. Ethiopia is the birthplace of coffee. And there is actually a really fun legend about how coffee was discovered. The story goes that back around the 9th century, there was an Ethiopian goat herd named Kaldi. He noticed that after his goats ate the red berries from a certain bush, they became extraordinarily energetic. Like they would not sleep and were jumping around all over the place. He brought some of these berries to a nearby monastery. The monks boiled them up into a drink, and found that after drinking it, they felt incredibly alert. They could pray through the night without dozing off. And that, according to the legend, is how coffee was born. Whether or not the story is entirely true, Ethiopia really is the historical home of coffee, and it remains one of the most important coffee-producing countries in the world today. Beyond Ethiopia you have Colombia and Brazil and Vietnam. Just those 4 countries together produce the vast majority of the world's coffee. So after those coffee beans are harvested on a farm somewhere, they first go through local processing at the source. The outer skin and pulp of the coffee cherry are removed. Then the beans are either dried in the sun or washed. Then they are bagged up and exported to coffee roasters around the world. The roasters buy the green unroasted beans, roast them to bring out all those flavors, then sell them to coffee shops, beverage companies, or directly to consumers. The whole journey might span 3 or 4 continents. That cup of coffee you drink every single morning is the final destination of a truly epic voyage. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the global food supply chain. Sounds complicated, right? Do not worry. Today Jenny is going to walk you through it in the most relaxed and engaging way. So by the end of our chat, you will have a whole new appreciation for what is on your plate. So first things first, what exactly is a food supply chain? A supply chain is the complete journey a product takes, from raw materials all the way to the final consumer. When we apply that to food, it looks something like this. It starts from the moment a seed goes into the ground, all the way through to the farmer harvesting the crop. Then transportation, processing, storage. Then wholesalers and retailers. And finally your dining table. Sounds like a pretty simple straight line, right? But modern food supply chains are not straight lines at all. They are incredibly complex 3-dimensional networks. Sometimes a single ingredient has already traveled around this network several times before it ever reaches your hands. Let me take you through a little game I like to play. I call it Follow Your Food. Let us start with bananas. Bananas are something so many people eat every single day. The banana you pick up at the supermarket, if it did not come from a local farm, very likely traveled from the Philippines or Ecuador. Do you know where Ecuador is? It is tucked into the northwestern corner of South America, right on the Pacific coast. Ecuador is the world's single largest exporter of bananas, sending enormous quantities to markets around the globe every year. Now here is the thing about those bananas. They are picked from the trees while they are still completely green. Because if the farmers waited until they were ripe, they would spoil long before reaching their destination. After harvesting, the bananas are quickly packed into large cardboard boxes, then loaded onto refrigerated cargo ships. These are special vessels with temperature control systems throughout. Inside those ships, the bananas are kept at around 13 degrees Celsius, just cool enough to keep them in a dormant state, green and firm. Then the ships set sail across the Pacific or the Atlantic, drifting for 1 to 2 weeks across the open ocean. During that crossing, those bananas are held in a kind of suspended animation. Not quite alive in the way they would be growing on a tree, but not yet ripening and dying the way they would at room temperature. The entire refrigeration system on the ship must function perfectly throughout the voyage. Because if the temperature rises even a few degrees for too long, the whole shipment could begin ripening prematurely. And an early ripening banana that starts turning yellow in the middle of the Pacific will be brown mush by the time it reaches the supermarket shelf. When the ship finally arrives at its destination port, the bananas are unloaded and taken to ripening warehouses. Inside these specialized facilities, workers release a gas called ethylene. Ethylene is actually a natural plant hormone that triggers ripening. Bananas naturally produce ethylene themselves as they mature, so using ethylene in the ripening warehouse is just mimicking what nature does. Within a few days, the bananas transform from green to the beautiful yellow color you see in stores. Then they are loaded onto refrigerated delivery trucks and distributed to supermarkets everywhere. When you pick up that banana and put it in your shopping cart, did you know it started its journey as a completely green fruit? It traveled thousands of kilometers and only turned yellow just for you. Every time I think about that, I find it genuinely magical. Now let us talk about beef. So many people love beef. If you are in Taiwan, beef noodle soup is basically a national treasure, right? Where does that beef in your bowl come from? Taiwan does raise its own cattle, but the amount of land available is limited. So local beef production is nowhere near enough to meet demand. Taiwan imports enormous quantities of beef every year, mainly from Australia, the United States, and New Zealand. So imagine the journey of a piece of Australian beef. Out on the vast open grasslands of Australia, a cow spends its life grazing on pasture. Then it is transported to a processing facility, slaughtered, broken down into different cuts, vacuum sealed and rapidly frozen, loaded into refrigerated shipping containers, placed on refrigerated cargo vessels, which then cross either the Indian Ocean or the Pacific Ocean. After arriving at Taiwanese ports, the beef still has to pass through animal quarantine and customs inspection to make sure there are no disease risks and that it meets food safety standards. Only then can it enter the Taiwanese market. From the port it goes to large frozen storage warehouses, then distributed according to orders to meet distributors across the island, who then sell to restaurants, supermarkets, and individual consumers. The entire process might take weeks or even longer, and from the moment of slaughter all the way to your plate, the temperature must stay below -18 degrees Celsius the entire time. Think about the massive cold chain infrastructure that requires an enormous network of refrigerated ships, frozen warehouses, and refrigerated trucks, all working together just to get that food safely to your table. When you stop and think about it, that is genuinely impressive. Here is another dimension to this story worth appreciating. The modern cold chain is one of the most transformative technologies in human history. Before mechanical refrigeration was invented in the 19th century, food could only travel as far as it could survive without spoiling. Cities depended entirely on the farms immediately surrounding them. Famine struck because food surplus in one region could not reach shortage in another fast enough. The development of refrigerated rail cars, ships, and later trucks completely redrew the map of where food could be grown and where it could be eaten. The next time you open your refrigerator, you are touching one end of a chain that stretches back through one of the greatest technological revolutions in history. Now let me tell you about my personal absolute favorite: chocolate. The story of a chocolate bar might be the most spectacular food journey of all. Cacao beans are grown primarily in West Africa and Latin America. Ghana and Ivory Coast in West Africa together produce roughly 60% of the world's cacao beans. So the chocolate you eat very likely has its origins in West Africa. The cacao tree is a fascinating plant. Its fruit grows directly from the trunk of the tree, not from branches like most fruit trees. The cacao pods look like large football-shaped fruits just hanging right off the trunk. Inside each pod is white pulp, surrounding dozens of cacao beans. After harvesting, the beans and the pulp are left together in large containers to ferment. This fermentation step is absolutely critical. It is what develops the complex flavor precursors in the beans, the building blocks of all those wonderful chocolate aromas. After fermenting, the beans are spread out to dry in the sun, reducing their moisture content to a level suitable for long-term storage and transport. Then the dried beans are bagged up and exported to processing plants in Europe, North America, and elsewhere. At the processing facility, the beans are first roasted. The temperature and duration of roasting determines the final flavor profile. Then they are ground up. During grinding, the beans release their natural fat content, which is called cacao butter. The result of grinding is a thick liquid called cacao mass or cacao liquor. This can then be separated into cacao butter on one side and cacao powder on the other. Chocolate manufacturers take these ingredients, add sugar, milk powder, and additional cacao butter in varying ratios to create different types of chocolate: dark chocolate, milk chocolate, white chocolate. Then comes the refining process, tempering, and molding. Finally, the chocolate is packaged and shipped around the world. There is also another dimension to the chocolate story worth mentioning. Cocoa farming in West Africa supports millions of small-scale farmers. These are families who depend on cacao as their primary source of income. The price of chocolate on your supermarket shelf has a direct connection to whether those farming families can afford school fees, or healthcare, or basic food and shelter. The global food system is not just about logistics and supply. It is a deeply human story connecting your choices to lives on the other side of the world. That piece of chocolate in your hand, its raw ingredients started in West Africa, were processed somewhere in Europe, and then traveled to reach you, crossing at least 2 or 3 continents along the way. One small piece of chocolate. What an extraordinary journey. Okay, after all these stories of food traveling the globe, you are probably asking a very natural question. Why not just eat local food to begin with? Would not that be simpler and better? That is such a great question. The answer comes down to a concept economists call comparative advantage. Sounds very academic, I know. But the idea is actually quite intuitive. Every place has something it is particularly good at. Some regions have soil and climate that are uniquely suited to growing certain crops. Some places have technology and infrastructure that make them especially efficient at certain kinds of processing. So the world naturally falls into a kind of division of labor, where each type of food is produced in the place best suited to making it. For example, the Andean regions of Colombia have a specific combination of altitude, temperature variation, and rainfall patterns that are just perfect for producing coffee beans with extraordinary fruity acidity and floral notes. These are flavors that are very difficult to replicate anywhere else. Another example, the Netherlands is a small country on the coast of the North Sea. Not naturally an ideal environment for agriculture. Daylight hours are limited and the climate is not particularly warm. But the Dutch have applied cutting-edge greenhouse technology and turned farming into an almost exact science. The Netherlands is the second largest agricultural exporter in the world, right behind the United States. Yet the Netherlands is only slightly bigger than Taiwan in land area. Through high-tech greenhouse agriculture, it has become one of the most important agricultural exporters on the planet. That is comparative advantage in action. Each place contributing its unique strengths to the global food system. Another remarkable example is Norway and salmon. Norway is one of the world's leading producers of farmed salmon. The long, cold Norwegian fjords provide ideal conditions for raising salmon in large open water pens. Norwegian salmon farmers have developed extraordinary expertise in managing water quality, disease prevention, and sustainable feed sourcing. So much of the salmon eaten across Asia, Europe, and the Americas traces its origins back to those Norwegian fjords. Chile is another major salmon producer for similar geographic reasons. Both countries have turned their natural geography into global food leadership. And of course there is Japan and its legendary expertise in rice cultivation. Varieties developed over centuries of careful breeding have produced some of the finest eating rice in the world. These specializations are not accidental. They are the result of generations of knowledge, geography, and dedication, coming together to feed a planet. But here is where the complications start. This globally divided food system comes with serious costs. One of the most significant is carbon emissions and environmental impact. Have you heard of the concept of food miles? Food miles is a way of measuring how far your food has traveled, from where it was produced to where you are eating it, expressed as a distance. The average person's daily diet, if you add up all the food miles from every ingredient, might reach several thousand kilometers. Imagine a single meal. If the rice is local, that is relatively close. But if there is imported beef, that might be thousands of kilometers. Imported olive oil might be over 10,000 kilometers away. Imported cheese might be another few thousand. Add it all up and it is genuinely staggering. But does higher food miles automatically mean a bigger environmental impact? Here is where things get really interesting and counterintuitive. Many people assume that higher food miles equals higher carbon emissions. So eating local must always be the most environmentally friendly choice. But research shows that this intuition is not entirely accurate. The carbon footprint of food is not just about transportation. The biggest factor is actually how the food itself is produced. Take beef as an example. Raising cattle is inherently a high carbon emission activity. And that is not primarily because of transporting cattle around the world. It is because during the digestive process, cattle undergo fermentation in their stomachs called enteric fermentation. This process produces large amounts of methane. Methane is a greenhouse gas. Its warming effect on the climate is many times more powerful than carbon dioxide. Cows constantly burping and passing gas releases methane. On top of that, there is the land and water required to grow animal feed, and the energy and chemicals involved in producing fertilizers and pesticides for those crops. These factors are the main drivers of beef's high carbon footprint, not the distance it travels. So sometimes buying imported New Zealand lamb in Taiwan can actually have a lower carbon footprint than you might expect. Because New Zealand sheep mainly graze on natural pasture, no need to grow large quantities of energy-intensive manufactured feed, even accounting for the long shipping distance. The total carbon footprint can end up lower than locally raised livestock fed on commercially produced feed. Does that result feel counterintuitive? The world of global food supply chains really is complex. There is a very famous study from the UK that found roses grown locally inside British greenhouses, because Britain's climate is not naturally suited to growing roses, required enormous amounts of energy for greenhouse heating, and actually had a higher carbon footprint than roses air freighted from Kenya. Because Kenya is near the equator with abundant sunshine and warm temperatures, growing roses there requires absolutely no greenhouse heating, even though air transport burns significant fuel. When you compare the totals, the British greenhouse roses actually came out worse. The food system is just that complex and counterintuitive. This does not mean we should stop caring about food miles altogether. It means we should think more carefully about the whole picture. Transportation does matter, especially air freight, which is far more carbon intensive than sea freight. Strawberries or asparagus flown across continents daily do carry a significant carbon burden from transportation. But the deeper lesson is that the environmental story of food is always more complex than a single number can capture. The most honest thing we can say is this: eating less meat, especially beef, has more environmental impact than obsessing over whether your tomatoes came from 50 or 500 kilometers away. That is a counterintuitive finding that many people find genuinely surprising. Now let me get to the most seasonally perfect part of today's topic. March, spring, strawberry season. Right now is peak strawberry season in Taiwan. Those gorgeous red strawberries from Dahu. Do you know just how complex the journey of that little red fruit really is? Let us start with the seedlings. Do you assume the strawberry varieties that Taiwanese farmers grow were developed in Taiwan? Some were, but many of the most popular varieties actually originate from Japan. Japan is genuinely world-class when it comes to strawberry variety development. Varieties called Tokyotom and Akiheim and Toyonoka are extremely popular Japanese strawberry varieties. Taiwanese farmers import seedlings from Japan and grow them under Taiwan's particular climate and soil conditions. So the strawberry you are eating, its genetic lineage may have already crossed the Taiwan Strait. And if we are talking about imported strawberries, the journey gets even longer. Strawberries are one of the most delicate fruits there is. They have a very short shelf life. At room temperature they might spoil within 2 or 3 days. So if they are coming from far away, they have to travel by air to arrive in fresh condition. Here is how it works. Once the strawberries ripen, they are harvested. Right there at the farm, sorting begins immediately. Workers separate them by size and quality grade. They are packed into special packaging with moisture retention properties. Then immediately loaded onto refrigerated trucks heading to the airport. Put on refrigerated cargo planes, flying for anywhere from a few hours to many hours. After landing at the importing country's airport, they are taken off the plane and immediately go through customs and food safety inspection. Only after clearing those checks can they enter the market. Then refrigerated delivery trucks take them to distribution centers, and from there to individual supermarkets. This entire process involves farm workers, sorting facility workers, freight logistics companies, airline crews, airport ground staff, customs and quarantine officers, cold storage warehouse workers, delivery drivers, supermarket staff. All of them played a role in getting that strawberry to your hands. This is true even for strawberries that did not travel very far. Even a locally grown Taiwanese strawberry from Dahu went through sorting, packaging, refrigeration, and distribution. Workers were involved at every stage. Decisions were made about when to harvest, how to pack, where to deliver. A whole invisible ecosystem of effort surrounds every piece of fruit you eat. One tiny little strawberry. How many people's hands did it pass through on its journey to you? Now I want to talk about something that many people might not have considered. The relationship between food supply chains and geopolitics. Sounds very serious, right? But I promise to keep this casual and fun. Because this really and truly is directly connected to what ends up on your dining table. Have you noticed that the prices of many foods have been fluctuating dramatically over the past few years? Cooking oil had a major price spike. Eggs have been expensive and sometimes hard to find. The price of flour-based products and bread has been steadily climbing. None of this is coincidental. There are global supply chain factors behind all of it. Let me tell you about Ukraine. Many people know Ukraine has been dealing with a war in recent years. But do you know how important Ukraine is to global food supply? Ukraine has a beautiful nickname. It is called the breadbasket of Europe. Ukraine is home to some of the world's highest quality black soil, called Chernozem. This type of soil is extremely fertile and perfect for growing wheat, sunflowers, barley, and corn. Ukraine and Russia together supply roughly 30% of global wheat exports, and something like 50% of global sunflower oil exports. When the war began in 2022, Ukrainian agricultural production and its ports were severely disrupted. Many fields became battlegrounds. Ports were blockaded. Farmers could not work their land normally. Exports were cut off. Global wheat and cooking oil prices immediately surged. This directly hit food prices in countries all over the world, especially in Africa and the Middle East, where many countries already heavily relied on food imports. These regions immediately faced serious food security crises. You see, a war happening in Eastern Europe can make it harder for people in Africa to afford bread. Through the tightly connected network of the global food supply chain, we are all far more interconnected than we realize. The same dynamic played out with the COVID-19 pandemic and food supply chains. When shipping container logistics collapsed in 2021, the ripple effects touched food systems globally. Fertilizer prices surged because shipping costs skyrocketed. Higher fertilizer costs meant higher costs for farmers, which meant higher food prices at your supermarket. A virus that started in one city disrupted the food supply chain for billions of people. These are not isolated incidents. They are recurring demonstrations of just how tightly linked the global food system really is. And this interconnection is only going to deepen in coming decades. As the global middle class grows, particularly in Asia and Africa, demand for diverse, high-quality food is rising enormously. Billions of people who previously ate very simple diets are now eating more meat, more dairy, more chocolate, more coffee. This dietary shift is one of the most powerful forces reshaping global food supply chains. And it creates both opportunities and enormous pressures on land, water, climate, and the logistics systems that move food around the world. Understanding the global food supply chain is not just an interesting intellectual exercise. It is genuinely important knowledge for navigating the world we all live in. Another very famous example is the Suez Canal incident. The Suez Canal runs through Egypt and is one of the most critically important shipping lanes in the world. Roughly 12% of global trade volume passes through this single canal. In March 2021, a massive container ship called the Ever Given was caught by strong crosswinds while navigating through the canal and got wedged diagonally across the waterway. It was stuck there for a full 6 days. During those 6 days, hundreds of ships were lined up at both ends of the canal, completely unable to move, including enormous numbers of vessels carrying food and raw materials. Those 6 days directly disrupted global supply chains, causing significant delays in the arrival of food products and ingredients at ports around the world, which then affected prices and availability. One ship stuck in the sand for 6 days caused the entire global supply chain to seize up like a muscle cramp, because modern global trade is too dependent on a small number of critical shipping routes. Once any one node in the system has a problem, the entire system feels the shock. Now let us talk about climate change and its impact on food supply chains. This topic is becoming more and more urgent, because the disruptions are not some distant future scenario. They are happening right now. Let me start with coffee. Coffee beans are extremely sensitive to growing conditions. They thrive best within a specific temperature range. Roughly 18 to 24 degrees Celsius is ideal, combined with appropriate rainfall and soil acidity. Most high-quality coffee is grown in what is called the coffee belt, the tropical zone between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. But as global temperatures rise, the conditions in this zone are changing. Many traditional coffee growing regions are becoming less and less suitable. Scientific research predicts that by 2050, the global land area suitable for growing premium quality coffee could shrink by more than 50%. The coffee you love might not only get increasingly expensive, certain rare and distinctive coffees from specific regions might become increasingly difficult to find at all. Now cacao and chocolate. The cacao growing regions of West Africa are experiencing increasingly frequent and severe extreme droughts. Rising temperatures also make cacao trees more vulnerable to disease and pests. A disease called cacao pod rot spreads more rapidly in warmer conditions. Global cacao production has been quite volatile in recent years. This is why you may have noticed that chocolate has been getting more expensive. It is not your imagination. There is genuine pressure on the supply side. Vanilla is another fascinating case. Do you enjoy vanilla-flavored ice cream? That beautiful, distinctive vanilla aroma, if it comes from natural vanilla, primarily originates from Madagascar, a large island nation in the Indian Ocean off the east coast of Africa. Madagascar is the world's most important producer of natural vanilla. But the vanilla-growing regions of Madagascar have been increasingly battered by powerful cyclones in recent years. Vanilla plants are destroyed. Yields drop dramatically. The price of natural vanilla extract has risen enormously in recent years. It is now one of the most expensive spices in the world, ranking roughly second after saffron. So many manufacturers have started switching to synthetic vanilla flavoring. The main chemical compound in synthetic vanilla is called vanillin. The taste is similar to natural vanilla but not quite the same. Next time you buy ice cream, if you see it labeled natural vanilla, that is actually something genuinely precious. There is a broader pattern here that is worth noticing. Some of the world's most beloved flavors and ingredients depend on very narrow and fragile production systems. A single crop in a single country, supplying the majority of world's total demand. Saffron from Iran and certain regions of Spain. Black pepper from Vietnam, which supplies about a third of global production. Tahini sesame from Ethiopia and Sudan. These concentrated supply chains work incredibly efficiently in normal times. But they create significant vulnerability when anything goes wrong. Whether that is a cyclone, a drought, a political crisis, or a disease outbreak. The lesson is that the diversity of where our food comes from matters enormously for resilience and food security. After all this discussion of global supply chain challenges, you might be wondering, what can I actually do about this? What difference can one person make? The good news is you do not need to make any dramatic changes. Starting with just a few small shifts in awareness is more than enough. The first awareness is to eat more seasonal produce. It is March and spring is here. Taiwan has so many wonderful seasonal ingredients right now. Strawberries, everyone knows about those. Makat mandarins that are incredibly sweet. All kinds of tender spring leafy greens. This is a great time for burdock root too. Seasonal produce is typically locally grown. And because it is harvested at the peak of its natural season, the flavor is at its absolute best. No need for long-distance transport. So food miles drop naturally. Moving in sync with the rhythm of the seasons is actually a deeply wise way to eat. There is a Japanese concept called shun. It refers to the peak season of a particular ingredient, when it is at its absolute finest. When flavor, nutrition, and freshness are all at their maximum. The Japanese culinary tradition places enormous importance on shun, and celebrates the arrival of seasonal ingredients as almost a cultural event. The first bonito of spring, the matsutake mushrooms of autumn. These are moments of collective celebration in Japanese food culture. Taiwan has its own version of this seasonal rhythm, and being in tune with it, eating strawberries in March, mangoes in summer, persimmons in autumn, is not just environmentally sensible. It is one of the most delicious ways to experience where you live. Is actually a deeply wise way to eat. The second awareness is to get to know where your food comes from. Visit traditional markets and farmers markets more often. You can ask vendors directly. Where did this vegetable come from? Which farm? Many vendors at traditional markets source directly from nearby farms. The food miles involved are much shorter. And because no long-distance transport is needed, the produce is usually fresher and more flavorful. Farmers markets are even better. You can talk directly with the farmers who grew what you are buying. Learn about their growing practices. This kind of connection with your food and the people who produce it is meaningful in itself. The third awareness is to check the country of origin on product labels. Taiwan has regulations requiring imported foods to label their country of origin. So when you are shopping at the supermarket, take a few seconds to look at that label. Are those apples from Taiwan, Japan, or the United States? Is that salmon from Norway, Chile, or Canada? Is that beef from Australia or the United States? Simply building this awareness gives you a much deeper understanding of what you are eating. You do not have to make any particular choices as a result. Just knowing where your food comes from is already meaningful. In Japan, there is a culture of what they call sanchi, meaning place of origin. Japanese consumers are famously attentive to the provenance of their food. Producers take enormous pride in regional identity. A Niigata rice, a Kyoto vegetable, a Kobe beef. These are not just labels. They are promises about terroir, tradition, and care. When consumers pay attention to origins, producers have every incentive to take pride in where they come from. That kind of food culture, built one conscious consumer at a time, creates healthier, more sustainable, and more honest food systems. And it starts with something as simple as reading a label at the supermarket. The fourth awareness is to reduce food waste. This one is directly connected to the food supply chain. Did you know that roughly 1/3 of all food produced globally ends up being wasted? 1/3. All that wasted food represents land that was cleared and farmed, water that was used, human labor that went into producing it, transportation and refrigeration energy that was consumed. All of it wasted. If we can reduce food waste, the positive impact on the environmental footprint of the entire food supply chain would be enormous and immediate. Research suggests that if food waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world, right behind the United States and China. The land used to produce food that is ultimately wasted is larger than the entire landmass of China. The water wasted in producing food that nobody eats is equivalent to the annual flow of the Volga River, 3 times over. These are staggering numbers, and they underscore why reducing food waste is one of the single most impactful things individuals and societies can do. For the environment, for food security, and for economic efficiency. Buy only what you will use. Store leftovers properly. Use ingredients that are close to expiring first. These small habits add up to something genuinely significant. Finally, I want to share something that always moves me deeply whenever I think about it. The sheer number of people whose efforts support every single meal you eat. Imagine one bowl of beef noodle soup. Behind it there are farmers on Australian ranches, standing under blazing sun, caring for cattle. There are workers in processing facilities, sailors crossing oceans on refrigerated cargo ships, dock workers unloading cargo at ports, quarantine and customs officers ensuring food safety, warehouse workers laboring around the clock in freezing cold facilities, truck drivers making refrigerated deliveries across the country, market vendors selling fresh produce every morning, chefs in kitchens simmering broth and preparing ingredients. This is a chain connected by the work and dedication of countless human beings. Every single bite of food you take contains the combined effort of so many people. When I think about that, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for food. And I feel much less willing to waste even a single bite. Your dining table is a microcosm, reflecting global agriculture, trade, climate, and politics all at once. Every bite of food is the final destination of a long and complex journey. And you are the luckiest destination of all. Alright, that is all for today's The Jenny Weekend Chat. The global food supply chain sounds like a huge, distant topic. But it is actually hiding right there in your 3 meals every day. The next time you pick up a strawberry, brew a cup of coffee, or take a bite of chocolate, think about the incredible journey it has been on. Does that one bite taste a little different now? I hope it does. Because that small shift in perspective, that moment of pausing to think about the journey your food has taken, is the beginning of a richer, more conscious relationship with what you eat, and a deeper sense of your own place in this extraordinary global system. We tend to think of ourselves as individuals, eating our own meals, living our own lives. But every single meal connects us to farmers we will never meet, to sailors crossing oceans we will never see, to soil and rain and sun in places we may never visit. Food is the most intimate way the world enters our bodies. And the global food supply chain is the invisible thread that connects your table to almost every corner of this planet. That is something worth thinking about, even for just a moment, over your weekend meal. Thank you so much for spending your weekend afternoon chatting with Jenny. Remember to treasure your food. See you next time.